Hey everyone, Wayne Fox here. Kind of a wintry day out there. Not a lot of snow, but kind of a gray day, I guess you'd call it. Good day to do a video, and I just happened to get my new OWC ThunderBolt dock that came today. This is the ThunderBolt 4 version of the dock. And so what I thought I would do is open it up, talk about what ports it has, specifically compare it to the Caldigit TS4, which I also have, and talk about why this is quite a bit more limited, but still might be a good option depending on what you actually need. Now, I have a OWC ThunderBolt 4 hub, and a hub typically has one input device of one type, USB or Thunderbolt, and then it breaks that into several of the same. So the comparison is a hub on spokes on a wheel. And a dock, of course, usually takes an input and then it converts it to several other kinds of input. And of course, this is kind of a combination. It serves as a Thunderbolt hub, but it also serves as more as a Thunderbolt dock. And I guess they use the term dock to make sure that's clear. I thought what I would do is after we open it up and show what it has, we'll talk a little bit about what Thunderbolt 4 brings to the table, why a Thunderbolt 4 hub might be useful, talk a little bit about what the limitations are of this, and then do a direct head-to-head comparison to the TS4 by Caldigit. Now, the one thing I will mention is this is a lot cheaper than the TS4, and it is also a lot more limited than the TS4 as far as the number of ports it has available. If it has the ports that you need, it would be a good option. But if you need a lot of the other ports that the TS4 offers, then you might want to go with it. Now, it's $170 cheaper, and so that might be a motivation there if you can get by with this one. Okay, let's just see what comes in the box. This looks like it's a little smaller than the actual Thunderbolt 3 dock they used to make, very similar in build. And I'm sure there's not much else in here. We have a little card, which gives you a QR code to scan. I should assume to get directions. Power cable, power supply. Power supply is a little smaller than the old dock was. And we have a nice Thunderbolt 4 cable. So pretty straightforward, not much to it. Okay, well, let's look and see what the ports that it offers. I didn't really look at this when I bought it. First of all, on the front, you'll see that we have an SD card slot, a USB 2 port. That I don't understand why they bothered with a USB 2 port and not just go ahead and put another USB 3 port in the front. It doesn't make any sense. There's an audio in and out here. And then, of course, we have the connection to our computer. That also puzzles me. That means you got a cord coming from your computer, having to plug into the front of this. I think that port should be on the back. This is the same mistake they made with their Thunderbolt 4 hub that they made. It doesn't make any sense at all. The only thing you should have going in the front are things that are used occasionally, and you need accessibility, but not constantly. And certainly the connection to your computer doesn't qualify as that. On the back, we have 3 USB 3.2 ports capable of 10 gigabit per second speed. We have what I assume is a gigabit Ethernet port, has 3 Thunderbolt 4 outputs, which are also USB 4 compatible as well. And then we have our power. So pretty limited in the ports. I'm quite disappointed that the front USB port is only a USB 2. I don't understand that at all. And I also don't understand why they keep putting the input on the front of the device when typically you're going to want everything plugged in the back except for things you plug in occasionally. You might have an SD card, Thunderbolt device you plug in, or a USB device you plug in occasionally. But I just don't understand the reason for the input to be on the front. Kind of a poor design flaw. So right off the bat, I'm a little disappointed, but it still might do what I need. Well, it snowed overnight and it's still snowing. Another good day to work on a video. Let's real quickly review the difference between Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4. Now understand that Intel controls the Thunderbolt technology, and anything using the Thunderbolt term must be certified by Intel. Thunderbolt 3, you had to certify that you could handle a 4K display With Thunderbolt 4, you've got to be able to handle 2 4K displays or an 8K display. Now that's assuming that the computer itself can handle that, which isn't always the case. Well, both Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 are 40 gigabit per second bandwidth. The PCI Express speed in Thunderbolt 3 was 16 gigabits per second, and in Thunderbolt 4 that's been doubled to 32 gigabits per second. Pretty significant. As far as cabling, only the shortest cable, which I think was 0.5 meter, was able to deliver the 40 gigabit per second bandwidth, and longer cables could only deliver about 20 gigabits per second. Under Thunderbolt 4, all cables up to 2 meters must be able to deliver the full 40 gigabit per second transfer speed. A couple of other things real quickly. Thunderbolt 4 devices must support wake from sleep with attached keyboard and mice. Not a big deal nowadays because I think most people are using Bluetooth anyway. The Thunderbolt 4 device must supply at least some charging power. I don't know if there's a minimum, but it can supply up to 100 watts of charging power to the host computer. Both the Caldigit and the OWC device supply, I believe, 96 watts of power to your computer to charge it while they're connected. And last, Thunderbolt 4 also supports USB 4, and that compatibility is a little strange. USB 4 supports Thunderbolt 3 is transferring, but Thunderbolt 4 can support up to USB 4, which right now I don't think that's happening. I think most Thunderbolt 4 ports only support USB at 10 or 20 gigabits per second. For example, I think the new MacBook Pros, that's only a 10 gigabit per second speed if you use a Thunderbolt port for that. But at least you can plug a USB device into a Thunderbolt port now if it's Thunderbolt 4, and your computer will see it. So let's get on with the last one, which is actually the most significant, I think, as far as these devices and why these new docks are sort of hubs and might be useful to you. So Thunderbolt 3, 1, 2, and 3 for that matter, required a strict daisy chain protocol. And if you wanted to use a display, that meant it had to be the last device in the chain. That was always a pain. In my case, my last hard drive is up behind me, so there's no way I could run a cable all the way back around to my display. Under Thunderbolt 4, that strict daisy chaining has gone away, and you can actually split that out to 3 separate ports. So that's why this device here that we talked about, you have a 1 Thunderbolt coming in and 3 Thunderbolts going out, which means you can have your display hooked up directly to one, you can have a local hard drive hooked up to one, and then you could daisy chain. Now that doesn't change the total amount of supported devices. Each Thunderbolt bus can only support, I think, 6 or 7 devices, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the hub itself counts as one of those devices. So you can't daisy chain 4 different hard drives out of each of the 3 ports in this hub. But the main thing it supplies to me is the ability to connect a display or to temporarily connect another drive without having to find the last one in your chain. And that's why these work a little bit more like a hub. So let me talk for just a minute about the 2 different ways I think people use docks. And one of the criticisms I have with the current OWC dock is the fact that the input is on the front and all the outputs are on the back. I think typically people use a dock in one of 2 ways. Either they use their laptop and they want to have some stuff hooked up and they want to hook it all up at the same time. And in that case, a front port for the connection to the host computer makes a little bit of sense because it would tend to be back behind it. You've got your screen in front of you. On the other hand, a lot of people want to use a dock like I do. My computer is closed. It's over here. When I'm at home, I want to use it as a desktop computer, basically. And I want to plug in 1 or maybe 2 cables in my case and have everything hooked up. And then I need access to the front of those for different things, such as USB drives, or in my case, SD cards and things like that. So in that case, you're much better off putting the Thunderbolt connection to the computer on the back and having another Thunderbolt 4 connection on the front. And that's where I think this dock is a little weak. It still is a great dock and it is a lot cheaper. And the real reason you would use one of these docks instead of the cheaper Thunderbolt docks that both companies make, the Caldigit TS3 Plus or the OWC 14 port dock, which have a lot more expandability, and yet they don't expand the Thunderbolt access point. So that's really the only reason you would consider these in place of the others. And we'll talk a little bit about that expandability as far as this device as we get into it. Okay, let's just compare the two real quickly. Both have a Thunderbolt 4 connection to the host. The OWC supplies 96 watts of charging power, where the Caldigit supplies 98 watts of charging power. I pretty much call that a draw. The OWC has 3 Thunderbolt connections on the back to peripherals, which are also, of course, USB 4 ports. They each supply 15 watts of bus power. The Caldigit only has 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which supply 20 watts of bus power. That's not as big of an advantage for the OWC as you might think, as we'll get to in just a minute. So let's talk about USB. The OWC has a single USB 2 port on the front, which is a 480 megabit per second port, and has 3 USB 3.2 ports, which are 10 gigabit per second speed out the back, all of which supply 1.5 watts of charging power. Now, personally, I'm clueless as to why they put that USB 2 port in the front. They already have a USB 3.2 bus in the device. Adding another one to it, I don't even think even would have added any expense or negligible expense. The only thing I can think of is that they feel there are some old devices that don't work with the backward compatibility of a USB 3 port. And that's the only thing I can think of. But it sure would have been nice to have a normal USB 3.2 port out the front, a little bit of a design flaw. The Caldigit, on the other hand, is very, very expansive in USB. And so in this case, it works much more like a true full-fledged dock. It has a USB-C port in the front, which is 20 watts of power. So it's great to charge your phone or tablet. It has a USB-C and a USB-A port on the front as well. This has 7.5 watts of charging power as opposed to the OWC's 1.5 in the front. And it has 4 USB-A and 1 USB-C port out the back. Again, all 10 gigabit per second ports. So altogether, 8 USB ports available in this device. That's a lot of USB connectivity and could be very helpful for a lot of people. So both devices have an SD card slot in the front. They're both SD 4.0 UHS-2 speeds, so they're pretty fast. The Caldigit also has a micro SD card slot in the front. Personally, I'm not too excited about that because I would prefer to put my SD cards in an adapter when I take them out of my cameras. They're just so stinking small. I just want something bigger. So if I drop it on the floor, it's not hard to find. So not a big plus, but it could be handy for some people. The OWC has a gigabit Ethernet port in the back, where the Caldigit offers a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port. If 2.5 gigabit Ethernet is available in your circumstance, then that might be something you'd want to consider. In my case, I don't even use Ethernet, and a lot of people don't. And gigabit Ethernet is usually the most common, I think, right now. But anyway, it's an important point to think about. Both of them have a 3.5 audio input-output on the front for headphones and a microphone. The Caldigit adds a separate audio and in and an audio out on the back. Could be handy for people trying to record audio. And in that case, if you plug some headphones into the jack on the front, it will actually disconnect the ones on the back, so you can't use them both at the same time. So the OWC will support 2 4K displays or 1 8K display at 60 hertz. Or if you would prefer, you can have a 4K display operating at up to 120 hertz. The Caldigit will support 2 6K displays or 1 8K display or 1 4K display at 144 hertz. Of course, multiple monitor support from either of these docks is dependent on whether the computer itself can handle multiple external displays. For example, the Mac Mini, the 13-inch MacBook, the 13-inch MacBook Air, the iMac, and none of those will drive 2 separate external displays. You can only hook up 1 external display to any of those. However, any of the MacBook Pros, the 14-inch or the 16-inch, from the M1 on, all of those can handle up to 3 6K displays. And I think even you can drive up to 4 external displays. So you could use one of these docks to drive 2 of those displays. And then if you had 2 more, you'd have to use the other ports available on the MacBook Pro itself. One big difference in the two is the Caldigit does this through a dedicated DisplayPort 1.4 port, whereas the OWC using DisplayPort 1.4 through one of the 3 available Thunderbolt connections on the back. So this means if you're attaching a display to these docks, that kind of affects the available Thunderbolt ports you have left. For example, with the OWC, you can use the dedicated DisplayPort port, to say that real quick, and you still have 2 Thunderbolt ports available, whereas on the OWC, you'll have to use one of those 3 that are available for that monitor, and you then have two just like the OWC. So that's why I said earlier, having that extra third one isn't as big an advantage if you're going to use a display. Now, if you're going to connect two displays, then neither dock will offer you any expandability in Thunderbolt connections, because you'll have to use all the extra Thunderbolt ports that are there to hook up displays. In the case of both of those, you still will have the pass-through Thunderbolt of the original connection, but you won't gain any Thunderbolt connections. And if you're buying one of these docks because you have different Thunderbolt devices that need plugged in, you might need to go ahead and use your MacBook Pro itself or computer itself, such as the HDMI port, to hook up your displays to leave those Thunderbolt ports available. Lots of configurations. Now, when you do this, there's several ways to do it. If you don't have DisplayPort displays, you can buy HDMI adapters. Both DisplayPort adapters are available with, I think, a DisplayPort to HDMI connection or the USB type to HDMI. I heard somewhere, I think it was on OWC's site, they have a very good video about using multiple monitors with the TS4, and they talk about using an active adapter if you're going to use HDMI. In my case, I have a USB-C to DisplayPort style cable going to one display, and then I have a DisplayPort connector to DisplayPort going from the Caldigit to the other display. Certainly, it's quite possible to hook up many displays to these docks and to your Mac itself. And last of all, the price for the OWC on Amazon is $229 versus $399 for the Caldigit. So there is a substantial difference in price, and that's why you really need to try to figure out what you are requiring, what you're trying to accomplish, to decide whether these docks are for you or not. So which one's right for you? Well, I'll be honest, maybe neither. Both of these companies make a really good dock that is designed for expandability. I've done reviews on the TS3 Plus by Caldigit and the 14-port dock by OWC. I'll link that up in the corner. But these are really good docks and supply a lot of connectivity unless you need to expand your Thunderbolt 4 connections. In my case, I have a capture card that's Thunderbolt 4. I have 5 or 6 Thunderbolt 4, well, or Thunderbolt 3 actually, but Thunderbolt storage devices. And so I needed those extra Thunderbolt ports. Okay, let me interrupt for just a second. I got the video all done and realized I didn't make this point clear enough, and that's why I think you would want one of these docks over that previous generation. I think there's one really, really important reason you might opt for one of these, and that's because you want to use two displays from the dock and maintain your Thunderbolt connection. The previous generation docks, the TS3 Plus and the OWC 14-port hub, or dock, excuse me, they will also drive two displays. Now, I did say that Thunderbolt 3 didn't require that, but that doesn't mean it wasn't possible, and both of those earlier docks will drive two displays using a DisplayPort connection and the available Thunderbolt connection on the back. But that means you can't pass the Thunderbolt connection through, so you can't attach storage devices, or in my case, a capture card. With these other devices, these new devices, you can use two displays and still maintain your Thunderbolt chain through those two other devices. And to me, that's probably the most important reason you might opt for one of these instead of one of the others. Another possibility, if you have one of those old devices, such as the TS3 Plus or the 14-port OWC hub or dock, you can buy an actual Thunderbolt hub from either place. The OWC has 3 downstream Thunderbolt ports, just like its dock. It has one 3.2 USB port as well, and it's very, very small. It's only $130, so you could add that, and between the dock and that, you've got pretty much everything you need and far more connectivity than this hub alone, this Thunderbolt 4 hub. Caldigit also has one that's even better. It has 3 downstream Thunderbolt 4 ports, but it also has 4 USB 3.2 ports, and it will actually drive 2 displays through those Thunderbolt ports. So that's another possibility. As far as these two devices, the Caldigit clearly has a lot more expandability and connectivity with its 8 USB ports. However, if you're connecting multiple monitors and you still need an extra Thunderbolt downstream port because you have a Thunderbolt device, like in my case, then that third Thunderbolt port on the OWC might be useful. The price is quite a bit different, so if you really don't need all of those USB ports or some of the other things that the Caldigit offers, then maybe saving $170 and going with the OWC might be a pretty good option. Well, I'll put links to everything I've talked about in the last few minutes down below: the hubs, the docks, the cables, the HDMI adapters. I appreciate those that use the links. It helps me make a little bit of money to offset making some of these videos. This is something I do just for fun. It's just a hobby. And I spend a lot more money buying stuff to review than I do making money. Everything I review, I buy myself, and I actually usually end up using it. That's why I don't have a lot of reviews on a lot of other things, because I don't really want to order stuff to send it back to Amazon. I do that once in a while, but not very often. Anyway, appreciate those that are watch. Make sure you subscribe and sign up for notifications. Till next time, see ya.